Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. Myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, second part there for the 28th of June 2024. We will start our military aid and equipment video with Ukraine signing a security agreement with Lithuania. Okay, lots of these being signed. Zelensky was in Europe yesterday, in Brussels, doing all sorts of things to do with the EU, accession talks, etc., etc. But also lots of bilateral security agreements with many countries. Okay, but with Lithuania, what's interesting for this video is that they will annually provide Ukraine with defense support to the amount of 0.25% of GDP, as well as modern military equipment in the land, air, sea, space, and cyber electromagnetic spheres. Lithuania will also potentially resume a military training mission in Ukraine. So lots of stuff there. Now, the 0.25% of GDP is huge. Like if every country who is supporting Ukraine were to operate at those levels, Ukraine would have phenomenal amounts of equipment. So we must not underestimate how much these Baltic nations are helping Ukraine in terms of what their means are. Okay, Estonia is to send defense aid to Ukraine worth 100 million euros in 2024. The country confirmed it will allocate at least 0.25% of its GDP annually. So that's Lithuania, Estonia there in 2024 to 2027 for this Ukraine's assistance in a new agreement. I think does that put Estonia's aid to over 2 billion, or is that what's going on with Finland? Might be Finland, actually. So Finland have just announced its 24th package of military assistance to Ukraine, consisting of defense material valued at around 159 million euros, 170 million dollars. So that's really good news. Finland are not very forthcoming about what they include in their aid packages. They keep a lot secret due to operational security type things. Okay. As I said yesterday with my breaking news video, Israel is negotiating with partners to transfer 8 Israeli Patriot systems to Ukraine. All of them will be PAC-2. 4 of them originally were from the US and 4 from Germany. Then they are now presently with Israel, but they're phasing them out. So they will send them back if this deal goes through. There is an if there. But there are talks about this ongoing at the moment, and it looks good. This will be phenomenal for Ukraine since these 8 Patriot systems are PAC-2. Now they might not be great at shooting down ballistic missiles, but they have a longer range and they are good at shooting down aircraft. So actually, you can place these nearer to the front lines and shoot down all these. Hopefully, these airframes to 160 kilometer range. Is it? All these airframes that are flying around and dropping these guided glide bombs on the Ukrainians. And that's such a threat to the Ukrainians. They're being used so effectively that these PAC-2 would be an absolute godsend for the Ukrainians, even a cosmos send, should I say. So really, potentially really good news there. It is ongoing discussions concerning them. Colby Badwar said, as an addendum to this, most foreign military sales Patriot fire units do not have 6 to 8 launchers. 3 to 4 is much more common for most customers. So although some of the regular batteries that the US might produce particularly for themselves, would have 6 to 8 launchers in a battery. So if they are going to get 8 batteries, each of these batteries might only have 3 to 4 launchers because they're foreign military sales variants. But might not be definitely the case. He says this is for cost reasons, in case that wasn't obvious. Not that launchers are tremendously expensive, but there is no point in buying a lot of launchers if you aren't buying a lot of missiles to go with them. The missiles are expensive, and most FMS customers do have very significant acquisition objectives and inventory requirements. Poland is an obvious exception. So you might only want a battery to support just, to protect maybe a palace in your capital or something like that. And so having 6 to 8 launchers and all the missiles to go with it is a bit overkill. So anyway, nevertheless, these 8 batteries would be insanely good for Ukraine. And so that's a really big bit of news. And I really honestly hope that all my fingers and toes across that comes through. Now, Ukraine has secured assets to 50 million euros in Spanish recovery funds, a 1 million euro grant to support its private sector, 4.6 million for humanitarian demining, and additionally several agreements were made in energy, logistics and other economic sectors. So Spain is getting a little bit involved there with more overtly with support to Ukraine. Peter Fiala, the Czechia Czech Republic Prime Minister has said our ammunition initiative can regularly supply Ukraine with tens of thousands of heavy artillery shells per month. This is on top of the news that they had delivered what is thought to be 50,000 shells already as part of the Czech initiative. Now, if that's the sort of amount they can deliver a month, 50,000 is really good because, I mean, it's obviously you want 5 times that, right, every single month. But realistically, that's not bad. 50,000 would equate to, what is it, almost 2,000, 1,750 shells a day, something like that. So when you are looking at what Ukraine has been firing, maybe 2,000 shells a day seems to be what they're averaging. That is, at the moment, would be almost all of their daily allotment would come from the Czech initiative, especially if they can keep giving 50,000 a month. And so everything that's on top of that from, say, US, Germany, EU in general, UK, if South Korea help out, if Australia helps out because they have production there, then you are starting to get a upscale of the amount of artillery ammunition Ukraine can use on a daily basis. 18 countries have joined the initiative, and the first deliveries funded by Germany, who have already arrived in Ukraine. The Czech Republic itself has contributed 865 Czech krona. This money will be used for ammunition from the only Czech manufacturer of ammunition, STV Group. This is an investment in the security of our citizens and of Europe as a whole. I wonder if that's where all the foreign foreign shells are being sorted out to make sure that they are up to scratch, because there is an issue with some of these, or a lot of them coming in from far and wide, aren't quite ready to be fired, at least not safely. Euromaidan Press reports this is what Lieutenant General Andreas Marlow, head of the EU Special Training Command Centre near Berlin. We have received more training requests as Ukraine continues to mobilise, in particular for basic training. This is really good news. That's the kind of problem you want, which is too many people to train, which means that, I don't know if it's too many, but they are receiving more requests, which means that the Ukrainian mobilisation is having effect. Right, German aid to Ukraine reports that German company Trasco Bremen has handed over 9 armoured Toyota Land Cruiser 300 GXR SUVs to the state's Transport Special Service. According to CEO Sergei Luzun, the delivery was supported by the German government. It's really good news. They are obviously going to be useful for the Ukrainians, some armoured SUVs. They go through SUVs 10 a penny, don't they, the Ukrainians, or both sides. Because they are used very much for transportation, but if you drive these around the contact line area, then you are going to be at risk. Now, I've just seen a Max Pro mine-resistant ambush protection vehicle drive through Chasiv Yar in between like mortar and ammunition bombardments, and it gets through and gets to Chasiv Yar. Seems to be pretty wrecked. It's pretty horrific at Chasiv Yar at the moment, by all accounts. Even though the lines haven't really moved for the last week or so, it seems to be exceptionally heavy fighting. The place has been taken to pieces, it's pretty horrific. But it was incredible to see his Max Pro like speeding through a proper war zone, evading getting hit. Right, German aid to Ukraine then adds something to a question I had yesterday. So the RCH 155 stands for Remote Controlled Howitzer 155 mil. It's a self-propelled howitzer on wheels, and on the Boxer chassis. The UK is going to be taking these on in cooperation with Germany. I think it's Rheinmetall. And I was saying that the remote controlled howitzer is not fully remote controlled yet, but it's built so that it will be able to have that, I guess, with some modifications or whatever. But I didn't know quite how much was automated at the moment. And actually, German aid answered this with the AGM artillery gun module is fully autonomous. Loading of the shells as well as the propellant charges is done without a crew. They plan to also implement autonomous driving in the future, so no personnel at all is required to be actually inside the vehicle. Currently, it's a 2-man crew only, which itself is incredible. So you've got a 2-man, as I said, nice, that's in tomorrow. This is incredible because 2 men. So first of all, you don't need as much training It's not as costly. Yeah, you can talk about like jobs and automation and save that. And in terms of if you lose one of these things, if it gets fundamentally blown up, disassembled, then you're losing only 2 people. And so training to get them back up to scratch, to get other people to operate these, it's less of an issue. You're not losing as many people. And also it appears to be, easier to operate, arguably. Just a much more efficient way of going about doing artillery. So that's really interesting. And if Ukraine are due to get these, quite a few of them, but not for some time, I think. They're relatively new themselves. Right, French aid to Ukraine says, by this summer, Ukraine will have had a fleet of more than 60 Caesar, more than the French army has 58. 20 will be the upgraded version of the Mark 1. The 30 Caesar donated by France from the French army stocks are not the same as those built in 2024. So most of them, well, about half of them will be the older variant, but they seem to be doing a pretty good job with these. They are fairly large, not as easy to conceal. Shoot and scoot is a bit of an issue at the moment because it's the scooting part that makes you more vulnerable because you're easier to be spotted rather than if you're just hiding in a tree line. And of course, these are larger, more difficult to hide something like a Caesar compared to a towed howitzer. So there are some drawbacks, some advantages. Shoot and scoot with drones seems to be a notion that's being challenged at the moment. Sticking on France, French President Emmanuel Macron does not want to rule out that French soldiers will go to Ukraine in the long term, but far-right prime ministerial candidate Jordan Bardella thinks differently. Quote, if I become prime minister, which he likely will, no soldiers will be sent to Ukraine. Indeed, the latest polls are very good for Rassemblement National. They are looking like they are going to possibly get an outright majority. Absolutely incredible to see how far she's taken the far right here. In terms of becoming more acceptable and what that says about all sorts of things. Now, the left has got together in answer to the far right in a coalition, but the problem with the left is that it's a really broad coalition. So you got your social democrats, people that would be broadly in support of the Ukraine war, and then you've got your far left, you've got the communists. It's a real broad tent, and actually some of those are not for help for Ukraine. And there's not a lot of difference between the far left and the far right in terms of that foreign policy, those foreign policy objectives. And that's a bit of an issue. So the answer to the far right is the far left, and they don't seem to be, or at least that coalition, they don't seem to be a good option for Ukraine either. So you're left thinking, well, the centrists, so Macron is slightly centre-right, and then you've got Les Républicains. I don't know where they're going at the moment, but they don't seem to be doing particularly well in the polls. It's just not looking very good for Ukraine support in France going forward. That's such a shame and a problem for Ukraine, especially as they are so prominent in the EU. Colby Babois talks about senators. Now, there's been these kind of complaints. So CBC News, Canadian News, says that Ukrainian troops are learning that some of their Canadian-donated Senator armoured cars have limited usefulness close to the front lines, a military official in Kharkiv told CBC News. So they've been given 1,500 of these, or they are indeed setting up manufacturing, I think, in Ukraine for these. And they're complaining actually they're not so useful near the front line because you're quite vulnerable. Well, yeah, I mean, even I knew that they weren't MRAPs. They're not mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles. I've long told you these are based on security vehicles for banking. These are sorts of things you want to use, like 20 Ks behind the front line, gives you a bit of protection, saves you from shrapnel if you're near some explosions or whatever. Generally useful military vehicle, but you're not going to be using them like an MRAP. Like I just talked to you about the Max Pro, the American vehicle, like driving through with ammunition, with artillery going off here, mortar and all sorts. You shouldn't be using a senator like that. So I think it's a bit unfair on Rochelle's senator that it gets that kind of criticism. Colby Babois says nobody with any clue was ever under any illusion about what the Senator is and what its capabilities are. It's an infantry mobility vehicle, IMV. It's not an infantry fighting vehicle, so it doesn't have guns on top. I think can it have, might be able to have something on top. I've seen an armament on top. Anyway, it is not basically an IFV. When so many Ukrainian soldiers are either walking or using civilian vehicles, Senator is a big upgrade. So here we have an answer to that as well, an inevitable trade-off between mass production and capability. Starting with an F-550 chassis, 4 Senators can be made each day, compared to perhaps 8 LAVs a month. So that you've got 8 LAVs, so they're the Canadian big APCs, right? So you can either get 8 of those a month, right? Or so that's 8 versus 124 Senators can be made a day. So you got 120 Senators can be made a month, and 8 LAVs can be made a month. Well, where are you going to spend your money? Now, survivability is an issue, but it's how you use them. So there's a trade-off. What do you need, etc., etc. But they've had 1,500 of these, and I think they'll be useful for the Ukrainians if utilised correctly or appropriately. They can also be fixed in field situations where LAV-6 or ACSV could not. Not perfect capability, but what is? I mean, it depends what you want to use any given piece of equipment for. I'm trying to stick a square peg in a round hole. Okay, and there was another one. I might go and find that actually, because it's important. Yeah, I can't for the life of me find it. Anyway, there was another really good thread detailing how, in fact, there is no evidence that North Korea have said anywhere that they are going to supply engineering troops or troops to Ukraine for Russia. And there's been a lot of talk, and the US saying, oh, we'll keep a close eye on this, but actually it might just be some kind of myth that's just come out of nothing broadly. I mean, there was talk of it being in the text of the bilateral agreement between Russia and North Korea, but I don't know whether this is a bona fide kind of fact, if you like, that North Korea have stated that they intend to send troops to support the Russians in Ukraine. So just be warned, this is NK News, fact check. North Korea has not announced plans to send troops to Ukraine yet, but take that with a pinch of salt. But yeah. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. I'm going to try and get my geopolitics video done, but I'm due up to the capital at some point this afternoon, so it's going to be a bit of a struggle. Speak to you soon.